Hey, Fly Girl. I'm René Vengelsdorf, Aviation CEO, FAA board alum, and high performance coach. Whether you're chasing your first discovery flight or leading at 40,000 feet, this show is your runway for bold career moves, real mentorship, and stories from women rewriting their flight plan. From the cockpit to the control tower, we're building the future of aviation one fly girl at a time. Welcome to the Fly Girls Guide podcast. Welcome to the Fly Girls Guide to Aviation Careers podcast. I am so excited about the guest that I have today. When I first conceived this podcast and started thinking about who I would want to be on it, the woman that I'm about to introduce was definitely in my top three. Bobbi Wells is an executive at American Airlines. She has been a friend and colleague of mine for well over a decade. And as I've watched her grow, I've admired her and emulated her in so many ways. Bobbi, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today.
Oh gosh, René, that is so incredibly kind and generous of you. When you reached out and asked me if I'd be interested, it took me a hot second to reply just because I know that you're so focused on creating impact in our industry, in particular, encouraging young girls and women to consider aviation as they think about their next steps or their future steps in their career path.
So you're an executive at American Airlines and you've changed roles there a couple of times, and sometimes I feel like maybe they see a lot of potential in you and add things to your title. So what exactly is it that you do today at American?
Thank you. I have had some amazing opportunities at American Airlines. I currently am responsible for all of the flight attendants. So in the airlines, it's called the In-Flight team, which means I have 28,000 flight attendants on my team and about 550 or 600 staff and management team members who take care of our flight attendants and support them as they operate in the system.
So you're in charge of making sure that they all look good, or what does that entail?
Yeah, it's a great question. My team ensures that flight attendants are hired and trained properly, that they meet the qualifications and receive their certification from the FAA, that they maintain that certification through regular training, every year annual training that's required, and then we also support them throughout the system as they travel. So on any given day, making sure that they have the right supplies and resources on board to take care of our customers, working to address the gaps when those gaps are identified, and then answering and supporting our flight attendants as they sort of negotiate life, because it's clearly more than just work. So we want to do our very best to ensure that they can be successful, that they can meet our customers and ensure that they feel valued and welcomed on board, and they carry forward the American brand to customers who don't fly very often or maybe are flying for the very first time.
Yeah, one of the things that I know has long been in your history is safety, and obviously that's the primary goal of flight attendants, is to make sure that every passenger has a safe flight, or so the captains say when they address the passengers at the beginning of the flight. What are some things that you get to ensure in training, in selection of flight attendants, to make sure that the general public is safe when they're flying?
Well, I've been leading this team for just over a year, about 16 months. And when I came on board, not having a flight attendant background, you're right, I came out of safety at American. When I first came to American 4 years ago, I moved into the safety team and was leading that team for about 3 years, which I loved. It was just an incredible opportunity to not just impact American and how we do things within our airline, but influence across the industry, because of course that's how safety works. There's nothing proprietary in safety. There's a ton of sharing that happens in aviation across not just airlines, but manufacturers and suppliers, and there's a wonderful opportunity, educators, wonderful opportunity to share better practices and ensure we're continuing to elevate aviation. our industry wouldn't exist if customers didn't feel safe on board and feel like that they could arrive at their destination safely. And in fact, what we know about aviation is that it's the safest form of transportation on the planet. It's actually safer to fly on an airplane than it is to ride on a skateboard. Or roller skates, or cross a railroad track. It's just incredibly safe. Nevertheless, mistakes happen and things happen within the industry, so that's the reason why there's such incredible collaboration. So it was such a gift to spend time in the safety world. It's where and how I got to know you, along with many, many people across the industry. So having said that, flight attendants, just like pilots and aircraft mechanics and aircraft dispatchers, have specific regulatory responsibilities to ensure that they look for gaps or errors, that they identify potential risks, and they either address it by making it go away, or they report it to the right person who has the authority and responsibility for addressing it. Interestingly, flight attendants, because they are hardwired to anticipate customers' needs and to look for potential issues, they're responsible for checking the equipment in the cabin. They're responsible for ensuring that they have everything they need before departure. They're responsible for ensuring customers know that they need to buckle their seat belts and how to use the oxygen masks should they become deployed, and all the other safety equipment on board that they demonstrate for every flight. So in order for that to happen effectively, flight attendants are constantly working to anticipate problems, and they work incredibly well. In fact, I would argue, across the industry, are among the most effective group to proactively report gaps or potential gaps so that they can be addressed before they become a problem, which is pretty extraordinary, because moving in such a safe industry, it's incredibly important to move away from waiting until there is a problem to anticipating or predicting a problem and doing something about it before it heats up or before it causes friction or elevated risk. So our flight attendants come in on an annual basis, and they get some recalibration around things like how to manage doors, how to use emergency equipment, how to do CPR, how to use our emergency kits, and responding using our medical advisors who are on the ground, collaborating with onboard physicians or nurses who might be available if there's an emergency with a passenger. So they're pretty extraordinary. They have all these skills at a level that really few people in an airline actually have, and no one else has as a regular part of their job. So it's really important that we continue to invest in their training and spending time with them to ensure that they have the skills and they get the opportunity to practice and hone those skills. Not very often is a flight attendant going to use those skills, but when the need comes, they need to be able to respond calmly and with confidence that they know how to handle it and that they've got the resources available to mitigate the problem and take action.
I love it. So you've been there a year in this role now. Mm-hmm. What is it that you end up doing on a day-to-day basis?
Most of my time is spent on focusing where we need to be in 3 to 5 years. As an officer at an airline, typically the focus is in the future, not so much on the tactical day-to-day operations. I have a team who really runs our part of the business. They have responsibility for their segment of my operation or my organization. Then those leaders who report directly to me are responsible for collaborating laterally to ensure that when they deploy or when they take action on something, they do that with alignment with each other and then outside groups. So that may mean that I do a lot of coaching for team members internal to America, and I'm meeting with an intern later today. So both internal and external, I talk to lots of people, encouraging them to continue their aviation career and look for opportunities to grow. And then I obviously am working to direct and guide and then assess how we're doing against those targets. When we set a target and we establish a program, then having regular touch points to make sure that they're on track, and then just adjusting or tweaking or asking questions, hopefully, that other people haven't thought of so that I can work to add value. Most of the time, my team is running the business. So it's also important for me to impact other leaders at my level and ensure that our teams are aligned and we're not operating in a silo.
Hey,
friends, are you dreaming of a career in aviation or ready to level up the one you've already started? Whether you're a student, a career changer, or a seasoned pro, you are invited to our free virtual aviation career fair happening November 5th. Meet recruiters from top aviation companies, explore career paths you never knew existed, and even sign up for interviews. It's completely free, but space is limited. Register now at weareflygirls.com/careers and take off toward your future in aviation. That's incredible. So obviously you can't tell me any trade secrets, but what kinds of things are you looking for 3 to 5 years from now? Maybe not specifically at American, but in the industry as a whole that you're planning toward and anticipating?
Well, I will talk about some things internal to American because I do think it's incredibly important how we identify potential candidates. When we have an opening for flight attendants, we get a flood of applications, which is a wonderful position to be in. I don't think that's unique to American. I think a lot of people are looking for flight attendant jobs and find that to be really exciting and a wonderful opportunity, which of course it is. But ultimately, it must be more than that. Every job brings with it certain expectations or certain requirements to be successful. Flight attendants, the day-to-day work that flight attendants do is very physically demanding. There's a ton of expectation and pressure to be able to watch customers and anticipate both what customers need as well as where customers may be in trouble. People are traveling and not necessarily traveling with the experience of travel like you and I have, and so they either might not know what to expect. They may be very nervous travelers. They may not be hydrated, so they could get dehydrated on board. Any number of things can happen that could cause a medical issue. So for me, what I'm looking for and what I hope to have my team is focused on, including the recruiting team, is to recruit people to be flight attendants who are resilient, who are team players, who are rule followers, who have high integrity because they're doing what they do without anybody watching over them, and people who are problem solvers and want to build things for the future. We know that flight attendants spend the most time with our customers in a face-to-face environment, and their ability to do that when it's really exhausting. The time we spend together this morning takes a tremendous amount of energy. Anytime you interact with other people, I get energy from it, but it also requires a great deal of energy. So it's not just physical, it takes emotional energy and it takes mental energy to pay attention to everything that's going on board. So it's not just about seeing the world. Yes, that's a great element of it, and it's a wonderful opportunity in aviation that's really unique to our industry in terms of where you can get to and how quickly you can get there. But if you don't understand the physical demands and requirements, you don't understand the demand to be available and on board and focused on the customer in a way that allows you to be present and effective every single day, then you're probably going to find it to be a difficult path to take as a career.
So you are kind of up-leveling your recruiting and changing the requirements, maybe not the requirements, maybe the desired qualities of someone who will be applying for that role and then being extended a job offer.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is creating clarity around what you will encounter. Being a pilot isn't necessarily what people perceive being a pilot to be. And if you don't understand the technical requirements and the pressure and the expectations on being a pilot, which of course you can't unless you're in the job, but if you don't understand it comes with a tremendous obligation and responsibility to take care of people and be incredibly on your game, just like being a doctor is, then you might find that that's not the right pathway for you. So for me, making sure that potential candidates understand what they're getting themselves into, it's not good for them and it's not good for us if they think they're signing up for one thing and they find out what they're actually getting in the real world when they're doing the job on a day-to-day basis is quite different. In addition, it's incredibly important for flight attendants to operate as a team. You think about it, this team comes together for a particular flight for that day. They may not see their fellow team members again, ever, on another flight. They may, but they may not. With 28,000, it's easy to get different combinations of people. And so the ability to set aside your personal preferences and focus on what does the airline need to deliver, and how can I interface with my fellow flight attendants in a way that delivers the most effective experience for our customers is incredibly important. Because of course we see, no matter where you look in the industry, when there is some sort of an emergency or an exception, how aviation people rise to the occasion, and we expect that and see that with flight attendants as well.
I love it. This is some really high level forward thinking. I'm wondering if you always wanted to be in this kind of role. Like, were you one of those kids that had visions of becoming the president of the United States or the CEO of a major company? Like, where did this start with you?
Wow. Well, I come from a tiny little town in Wyoming. So if you asked anybody I grew up with or anybody who knows me in my hometown, nobody would have said that they expected I would have this wonderful opportunity to be an executive at a major airline in the United States. I had a great uncle who was in aviation, but I don't really, and actually the airport in my hometown is named after him, so it's got a family name, which is a connection to my family, and my family feels really strongly about. But nobody else. My dad didn't serve in aviation. He was very passionate about it, but he didn't get that opportunity, nor did my mom or my brother or any of my sisters. So I sort of fell into aviation because it seemed like a really challenging opportunity. I was at FedEx before I was here. I spent 10 years in the Army, and when I left the Army, I joined FedEx and served as a senior manager in the pickup delivery part of the business, so on the logistics side, and got to know somebody who moved over the dispatch operation and took that over. He asked me to apply for an opening he had for a senior manager position, and really, René, the reason that I applied for it is because it seemed a little bit impossible. So I figured, why not try something that seems hard and is very different than my background? It required me to go get a dispatch ticket, and it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. It's very different than what people might think. Dispatchers are responsible for planning and following every single flight in commercial aviation. It's an extraordinary way to get a broad understanding of what happens with an airline, because dispatchers understand fueling, they understand maintenance, they understand a bit of what the pilots do on the flight deck. They have to have an understanding of the ground crew and what happens with weight and balance, and so it's a very broad exposure to the industry and what happens to make a flight legal and safe every single day. And dispatchers have that responsibility to plan it and then watch it while it's in the air. That was just such a great chance. I served in that team as a senior manager in various different roles for quite a while, and then moved over onto the airline side of it, where I did planning and engineering, led that team as a managing director. So one thing I would encourage everyone to think about when it comes to aviation is there are a few things that are unique about aviation. No industry is regulated at the level we're regulated, which adds a level of complexity that is unique to aviation. If you're interested in challenging, difficult, and incredibly rewarding jobs, you'll find that in aviation, no matter where you go. The other thing that's, I think, really special about aviation is that while there are people who are specialized, there's such opportunity to go look for and try new things. If you're a pilot, you can still understand security. You can understand human factors. If you're a dispatcher, you have a background in dispatching, like I did when I served on that team, you can move over and lead a planning engineering team, and then safety, and then move over to take an in-flight team like I did in my career path. There are fewer barriers, because most airlines, and this is true at American, we want our leaders to serve in many different operational roles so that they better understand how everything must mesh together in order for us to be collectively successful. It makes us better when we understand one another's jobs, and like I said before, we don't operate in a silo. So that's how I got into aviation. Interestingly, since then, both my boys have become aircraft mechanics. They both got their degrees, their undergraduate degrees, and then got their A&P license. My daughter-in-law is also an aircraft mechanic and serves in fleet engineering as the 767 fleet team leader for FedEx. My boys are also, both my sons are aircraft mechanics at FedEx. So, and my grandson, who's not quite two, his favorite thing on the planet is an airplane. So everything is, whenever he sees an airplane, it's the best thing ever. So aviation gets in your blood. You'll never have a boring day in aviation, unlike I think maybe a lot of other industries.
Well, one of the things that I've seen you do over the years is not, and I agree that lots of people in aviation have this, but I think you have it in spades, Bobbi. You don't just rise to a challenge, you seek out challenges where other people who are really established in their careers might look at coasting. You're like, what's the next thing I could do that would be a great challenge where I can make change? And honestly, I've seen you do it where you're not getting quite enough challenge in your role at work. And I don't see that at American. Maybe I saw a little bit at FedEx. And you went outside of your organization to look for challenge and opportunities for impact. Talk a little bit about what that did for your career and also how it impacted how you did your job.
Aviation is an incredibly small industry. It feels massive because we touch every part of the world, but it's actually really small. What I found when I moved to the safety role at FedEx was that there was an opportunity for me to establish and build my network, which frankly I never was really good at before then. In fact, when I would go to cocktail parties or industry events, it always felt like it was such a burden and so difficult. What I discovered and how I pivoted that a little bit, because a lot of people struggle with networking, is that if you focus, instead of focusing on what do I say when I go to these events, and spend time asking about the other person that you're meeting, not only does it give you a chance to learn about them, but it gives them better than that. It gives them a chance to talk about themselves, and nobody loves that. Everybody loves that. Everybody loves that opportunity to discuss either their background or where they're from or what they've learned. So it took the pressure away from me if I allowed somebody else to have that opportunity. So I'd suggest anybody who struggles with that, try that technique. The amazing thing that I found was when I first moved into industry roles outside of FedEx, when in meeting with groups, there was so much willingness to teach me and help me learn and understand. Most of the people that I was interfacing with and interacting with were men. Most of them happened to be pilots. I'm not a pilot and obviously not a man. So I knew that I was different than everybody else. And it didn't bother me having spent 10 years in the Army and then growing up in aviation and transportation. It's not unusual to be the only woman in the room. And so I don't really give that any thought. But what I thought was a wonderful chance was for me to learn. If you have this curiosity about how you approach the world, whether that's at work or other areas, then I think it allows you to be more nimble and learn and pivot when you have those opportunities. Learning isn't easy. My dad used to say to me, if you're not falling down, you're not learning. So learning is by itself a painful process. It's called growing pains, right? It's not called growing fun. So you have to get used to the fact that you're going to trip and fall when you're learning in a space. You're going to make mistakes, and that it truly isn't as embarrassing as it may feel to you inside, because other people understand that you're just trying to figure out the world. So I've had a chance to be involved with industry organizations that are supporting safety. I am have been and am a member of a number of boards that are all voluntary boards that are nonprofits, either affecting the industry or advising educational institutions. You and I served together for the International Aviation Women's Association board, and I had the wonderful opportunity to be the president of that board. I've been the chair of the Flight Safety Foundation, which is another board that serves to support the Flight Safety Foundation, which is the one of the longest existing organizations in our industry and responsible for archiving a ton of information and data and elevating the learning around safety in the industry. So incredibly influential and worldwide, which is a lot of fun to be part of. What I would suggest if anybody's looking for those kinds of opportunities is don't turn down a chance to do even a small thing, because it leads to bigger things. You get a chance to meet new people. They get to see what you're good at and what you're passionate about and how you can possibly contribute to their organization. It is extra work, as you and I both know. You have to do that work in addition to your day job. But the ability to impact the industry or feel like you left a place better than you found it is profound. And truly, that's why knowledge workers come to work every day, is to make a difference.
I love it. If you're looking for qualities in your successor, what are you looking for? If you're thinking about, okay, if someone's going to be moving into this role, what qualities would they need to be exhibiting or developing in order to be successful?
I'm super passionate about leadership. Since the day I walked out of college, I've had the wonderful opportunity to serve in leadership roles, because that's the way it works in the Army. In business, typically you work a number of years before you move into a leadership role. And I was really passionate about being a leader even when I was a kid. I didn't really know that's what I was headed toward, but I liked influencing people. For me, it's about making a difference to people. And in particular for this role, I think it's incredibly important for my successor to have a high level of empathy, a high level of understanding, tremendous grit. There's a lot going on in our system and a lot of flight attendants to support. So you must be resilient. You must be able to adapt. It's also really important to be super clear about where you're headed and not get too caught up in the fray, the day-to-day fray. My responsibility is to set a vision, is to set a direction. In the Army, we call that commander's intent. So that clarity on, I want to take that hill, how we get there, what you need for equipment and people and training and what your tactical plan is to get us on the top of that hill is up to you. But I'm telling you that's where I want us to be and by what time. So that's what commander's intent or vision looks like. So the person at my level needs for sure to be a problem solver, but has to be willing to let go and let their team run the business, because that's what managing directors and directors do in an organization, is they run the business. When you move up to the officer level, typically you're setting strategy and vision, and you have to find a way to let go of that tactical juice, that tactical interaction that you get, because it's so addicting. It's wonderful to know that you can do something today and be successful or complete it by the end of the day. My job is much more longer term, but it's also incredibly satisfying, because we're turning a battleship. When we do anything, we're turning a battleship. It happens very incrementally, very slowly. You must also be able to do that in partnership with the union and with the FAA and with people internal, as I mentioned before. So if you can't set aside where you're personally headed, because you don't do these jobs looking for a promotion or an opportunity. If they come, they come. Ultimately, I would be looking for somebody who's a selfless leader and is doing this for the flight attendants, not for themselves.
I love it. I could probably carry this on for another 2 hours and just soak in all the coaching that you're giving us in addition to information about your career. But I wonder if you could wrap this for us with what are one or two quotes or personal mantras that you live by that you think would benefit anyone looking for an aviation career.
Yeah, the first would be, do the hard things. If you have opportunities in front of you, and say you have multiple opportunities that you can consider for your next step, choose the one that scares you the most. You wouldn't have it on your list if you didn't think you were capable of doing it, and it wouldn't scare you if you weren't maybe just a little bit unsure if you could be successful. just give it a shot and do it scared until you figure it out. You won't be able to grow as effectively if you don't do that. My favorite quote is by Mark Twain, who said the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. I would encourage anyone watching this or any of your podcasts to seek a career in aviation and make aviation part of your why.
Oh, fantastic, Bobbi. Thank you so much for joining us and all of your inspiration.
Thanks for the opportunity, René.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. For additional resources, head over to flygirlsguide.com. If you're inspired to pursue a path in aviation or want to support the women who do, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And if today's conversation sparked something for you, share it with a friend. It's one of the best ways to grow the Fly Girls Guide community. Until next time.